So in this segment, we're going to be talking about ministers' improper attacks on judges threaten the constitution. Parliamentary inquiry concludes, and for some reason, mentally, I've not been able to do this video. I keep putting it off. I'm not sure why, but I'm certainly glad I did, especially when you've got the government attacking ECHR judges. So Priti Patel criticised scandalous ECHR ruling on Rwanda deportation, even though it's not a ruling, it's a temporary injunction. It's a different thing. Surely Priti Patel should know that, especially when she keeps saying it's not a ruling, it's an injunction. So that's a key problem, and I'm glad that I kind of didn't do this video because this article came out later. Then you've got this further article saying the government's top lawyer, Suella Braverman, could change her advice for political reasons, a senior Conservative warns. And so what you can see here is the politicization of the judicial system by the Conservative government, which shouldn't surprise anyone really, but it does show you that, by them attacking the judges constantly, what they're trying to do is force the judges to bend to the Tory ideology, inherently, create a bias within themselves. Because I'm surprised that the Court of Appeal and the UK Supreme Court did not intervene when it came to the Rwanda deportations. I'm genuinely surprised by that, especially when there was the Abu Qatada case, but they had other reasons to kind of block his deportation consistently. So ministers' improper attacks on judges threaten the constitution and erode public confidence in the legal profession, MPs have concluded. So this isn't some bipartisan, this isn't some partisan group here, this is a group of MPs. An inquiry into the independence of the judiciary also raised concerns. Decisions made by the Supreme Court may appear to be influenced by ministerial pressure. And that's because ministers, judges don't want to face criticism from the government. Remember the infamous Enemies of the People paper headline that they made. You've got judges being called woke and lefty and all this stuff when they tried to prorogue Parliament. Even the judges were attacked about that as well. It's just madness. Cross-party MPs noted that ministers have become more critical of judges in recent years, an evolution that might be described as a critique to attack. They argued that the government politicians are misrepresenting legal rulings to their own advantage. That doesn't surprise me at all. Attacking judges over their decisions and making threats about legal reform. Do you remember it was a couple of years ago they talked about moving to a US-style court system where judges are selected by politicians rather than internally by the judiciary? And what that does is create a highly political judiciary. You see how many Trump judges were appointed. You see the Supreme Court, which is incredibly skewed to a conservative leaning, especially because Trump got to elect 3. He did Gorsuch, the guy who loves beer and definitely didn't assault women, and that lady who looks like she's in a horror film. I can't remember her name. But yeah, you get my point. These are 3. One of them had some respect, I think. The other 2 were just clowns. Judges have been subjected to increased political scrutiny over the past few years, and with court rulings, you can say that I disagree with the judge for these reasons, but you can't be for, you can't state basic political reasons. You have to give an evidence-based reason. One example given in the report is the Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court Miller-Cherry ruling that found Boris Johnson's government had acted unlawfully when it decided to prorogue Parliament for 5 weeks in 2019. Remember, the government got a massive slapdown for that. Kwateng, who was a business minister at the time, told the BBC that many people believed the judges were biased. And you notice he doesn't say it himself, he says many people. Did you believe that? Evidently you believe it. It's the Trump thing. I've heard many people have said that Ted Cruz is very stupid. But not me, but many people. That's what they sound like. An unnamed source from Downing Street briefed The Sun that the judges were politically biased. How? In what leaning? Can you explain? Mogg described the ruling to colleagues as a constitutional coup. The only person who was doing a constitutional coup, ironically, was those Tories, Mogg and Johnson, in my opinion. Then Attorney General Geoffrey Cox claimed that the Supreme Court had made new law in order to rule against prorogation, even though they didn't, and that was the Attorney General at the time. This was the UK's top lawyer saying the courts are being political and making up laws, even though they can't do that. Something the report author argues misrepresented both the powers of the court and the reasonings of its decision. And the simple fact is that's why they attack the court, because they don't want the court to keep ruling against them. It's one thing a European court, the European Court of Justice ruling against the Tories, they're like, it's biased EU court, blah, 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 woke, all this nonsense. When it's a British court, it's far harder for them to fight back. In October 2021, the current AG Braverman criticised a huge increase in political litigation. So political litigation, I think she's talking about people like the Good Law Project, who used legal reviews to look into what the governments are doing. I think it's called a judicial review into government actions. They looked into the VIP lane, etc. And obviously the Tories don't like it because they don't like being called out. She accused the Supreme Court of stepping into matters of high policy in the Miller case. I mean, what was the policy? Surely proroguing Parliament was a just thing to do. It wasn't a political decision, was it? Oh, wait. Many of the attacks by the executive on the judiciary step outside what is constitutionally proper and helpful. Their tone and content often suggest that ministers know better than judges how to determine complex issues on law. And let's not forget, these judges are very much, raised in the judiciary in a sense. They understand British law better than most of these politicians ever would do. Most of these politicians are frauds anyways. It's very hard to be a fraud judge in the UK. The report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Democracy and the Constitution said, if you think you know more than a judge, then I've got news for you, Chief. My only gripe with judges is that some of the sentences they give out as a joke, but at the end of the day, it's politicians who set the mandatory minimums, so it's on them. Chair of the APPG and Labour MP for Swansea West, Geraint Davies, said the inquiry had found the judicial independence had been under attack from ministers and in the media with their questions about impartiality of judges, risking undermining public confidence in the law itself. And if it becomes the case that people stop believing in the judiciary because of what MPs keep saying about it, then even the judicial rulings that go for the government can be brought into disrepute here, and that's not what anyone wants. MPs added that government ministers are creating the perception of politicization of the judiciary, something which misleads the public. And again, that's true. If you try and claim the judiciary are political, like they are in America, it's just going to ruin the whole system. The judiciary is very important for keeping the executive branch in check, and also Parliament itself. It's entirely inappropriate for ministers to make unsubstantiated allegations about the motivations or reasoning of judges, the report continued. The report also highlighted the role of the media in eroding public trust in the judiciary. So remember this, enemies of the people, this thing. I think the guy who wrote this actually got a job from Theresa May in government. It's just tragic that they did this. Putting their pictures up here. They are basically asking for these people essentially to be attacked, in my opinion, by putting their pictures up and putting such a headline. It's madness. In the piece, the tabloid ranked each judge's apparent sympathy towards the EU with a Europhile rating. That's just sad, isn't it? Recent years have seen the judiciary accused by both politicians and the media of interfering in politics. The role of the judiciary is to look at the law and see if the government's acting lawfully or not. 2 independent reviews. You got the Independent Review of Administrative Law and the Independent Review of Human Rights Act found no persuasive evidence that the judiciary are interfering with politics. 2 independent ones. Do you want a third, a fourth, a fifth one? How many more do you want? Honestly, this government. MP said that they only had seen evidence of one direct attempt by a minister to influence a judicial ruling. So what you're seeing is not explicit bias from the judges, potentially it's implicit bias. They're thinking, I don't want my name in the press because I made a certain decision, so they might rule in a way they wouldn't normally if the government were, actual decent human beings. In this example, it was alleged that Patel instructed a senior civil servant to write to the president of the Tribunal Immigration and Asylum Chamber to express surprise at the number of grants of bail in immigration proceedings. And when you say, you're surprised by the amount that's given, that's meant to imply maybe you're giving out too many. The inquiry also found that certain recent decisions by the Supreme Court and the government's conduct may create the impression that the Supreme Court has been influenced by government pressure. And again, it's not explicit bias they're accusing the judges of, it's implicit bias. Deep down, they don't want to be accused by the government of stuff, so they might just, be a bit more favourable to the government. It's not to imply these judges are not good at their jobs, but at the end of the day, no one wants to get pelters in the press. They identified 7 decisions made by the court since 2020 in which judges had departed from previous legal authority and assumed a position more palatable to the executive. And there's no problem with the court changing their opinion over time, but they have to base that in legal opinion, not because they don't want to get attacked by the government. And the fact that these decisions they're making more recently go towards being friendly to the executive kind of hints at what direction they're going in. And of course, the eradication of judiciary is a further step towards fascism. In some of these, the court appears to adopt similar language to that used in the executive's political talking points. That's very dangerous if they are doing that. The court has decided fewer than 40 public law matters since this time. This represents a notable portion. And if they are using Johnson talking points, it means that the Supreme Court is being infected by this Tory government, and it does kind of bring their reliability into doubt that the ECHR had to step in here when the Supreme Court didn't and the Court of Appeal didn't. One recent favourable ruling was the decision to side with the Home Office's decision to deprive ISIS bride Shamina Begum of her political citizenship. And again, it's illegal to make someone stateless, which is what the government were doing. They argue that she would have rights to citizenship in Bangladesh, which wasn't true. Bangladesh said no, and even then, she went past, because I had a look at the legal requirements for Bangladeshi citizenship. She was over that age of where it's far easier to get citizenship. It's still possible, but very unlikely, especially given what she did. So the government effectively did try and make her stateless. The Court of Appeal had found that Begum should be allowed to return to the UK to stand trial. However, the Supreme Court reversed this decision, which is what the executive wanted. Javid was taking a lot of pride in saying, "Oh, I don't want Shamina Begum here. She's really dangerous," and all that stuff. And I think he pressured the courts into making a decision that maybe in other times they would not have made. At a time when the rule of law has been broken by Number 10 and the human rights of refugees is centre stage in the media, the case for a safeguarded and impartial judiciary is of critical importance to protect our fundamental values of democracy, rights and the rule of law from the erosion in the future, Mr Davies said. A government spokesperson said, "We have the utmost respect for the judiciary and all this other rubbish, but at the end of the day, they have openly attacked judges here. Let's not forget that." Patel attacking the ECHR, the very political Attorney General. Let's not forget that. These are key, really important things to remember. That the judiciary can be biased. They might not even realising it properly themselves, but at the end of the day, the government have been very critical of the judiciary system. When you threaten to reform the judiciary with an American-style system, you're explicitly saying to these people, your jobs are on the line. Be careful what you do, because we can get rid of you. Because I reckon the government, what they would have done is voted on which judges should be allowed to stay in the system and which judges shouldn't. And I think a lot of those Supreme Court judges would want to keep their roles in the Supreme Court, the highest court in the United Kingdom. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. I've got a couple other bits and pieces on judicial stuff. So yeah, subscribe for that stuff, and I'll see you next time.